It was a bitter cold day when the dragonborn arrived in the remote town of Dawnstar. He had heard before the tales of a museum in Dawnstar regarding the mythic Dawn, a cult worshipping Mehrunes Dagon over 200 years ago. The dragonborn was no stranger to the Daedric himself now, and was curious about the museum.
And here comes my first visitor. The Museum of the Mythic Dawn is open, friend.
Museum of the Mythic Dawn?
Yes, my collection of artifacts from a group that toppled an empire. Why don't you come in? You can browse the displays and we can talk. I have a job you look perfect for.
Sounds good.
Let's talk inside.
The man seemed strange, almost enamored with the evil cult.
Come talk to me when you're ready to discuss that job I mentioned.
It wasn't much of a museum, clearly just a man.
Tapestries hung here and outside were found in hideouts, where members of the Mythic Dawn would meet and plot.
Clearly just a man
The
staring.
cult's greatest accomplishment was the assassination of the Septim Dynasty and the opening of the Oblivion Gates.
Clearly just a man keeping memorabilia in his own home. To consider the Oblivion Crisis an accomplishment was strange indeed.
Those robes were worn during the Mythic Dawn's secret meetings, where they plotted to bring the Daedra Mehrunes Dagon into Tamriel. Each bolt of yarn used to make the robe was colored with a dye made from sacrificial blood. That burned paper is all that remains of the fabled Mysterium Xarxes, the blasphemous book written by Mehrunes Dagon himself. It's said that Mankar Cameron used the book to open a portal to a paradise where all his followers would live forever. The commentaries on the Mysterium Xarxes were written by the Mythic Dawn cult leader, Mankar Cameron. He promised a paradise awaited his followers when they died, that they would be reborn by Mehrunes Dagon's side. Ah, yes, that scabbard. Notice the insignia? An Oblivion Gate, a key symbol of Mehrunes Dagon, the patron Daedra of the Mythic Dawn.
The man was certainly passionate about the Mythic Dawn, and so the Dragonborn decided to hear out his job.
Did you have any questions about the museum, or would you rather talk business?
Let's talk about this job you want done.
A little history first. After the Oblivion Crisis, a number of groups cropped up dedicated to wiping out the remnants of the Mythic Dawn. One of these groups found Mehrunes' razor, the artifact of Dagon. They split it into 3 fragments and pledged to keep them apart forever. That was almost 150 years ago, and the pieces are still being kept by the descendants of that group, and they're right here, in Skyrim.
You want me to get those fragments?
At least 2 of the owners, Gunzel and Draskua, are dangerous marauders, and the 3rd owner, Jorgen, I only know he lives in Morthal. Here are my notes about them. I'll gladly pay you for getting the pieces any way you can. No questions asked.
I want to know more about the razor.
The razor is Mehrunes Dagon's personal artifact. It has always heralded bloody change and carnage. It's held many names. Dagger of the Final Runes, Bane of the Righteous, the Kingslayer. The Mythic Dawn worshipped Dagon as a god. Having his razor would be invaluable to my collection.
Why did you open this museum?
It's no secret that my family were once members of the Mythic Dawn. One of my forefathers was even chosen to assassinate Uriel Septim himself. We hid from our past for years, became tradesmen, people of coin and influence. But I realized that the Mythic Dawn's importance Our importance to history cannot be denied. I'll see everyone in Tamriel remember that for a moment, we held the fate of the world in our hands, for good or ill.
So what is this Mythic Dawn cult?
They were worshippers of Mehrunes Dagon, the Daedric Lord of Destruction and Change. The Mythic Dawn killed Uriel Septim VII and his heirs, triggering the events that led to the Oblivion Crisis when the Daedra invaded Tamriel. All that remains of the infamous cult I've gathered in my museum.
Who is Mehrunes Dagon? Other than what you just told me, which was essentially who he is.
Ah, an excellent question. Mehrunes Dagon is the Daedric Lord of Change, Destruction, and Ambition. Dagon's Mythic Dawn cult killed the Septim dynasty and opened the Oblivion gates into Tamriel. They called it the Oblivion Crisis. Good luck finding the fragments.
Pix and Pooks had heard all he needed to know. This dagger, while a sinister artifact, didn't sound like it could do too much harm. Pix and Pooks owned quite a few artifacts himself personally, and he certainly hadn't caused... well, perhaps he had. The shards were scattered across the land. He decided to start at the nearby Morthal.
My duty is to guard Rena Meredith.
Sorry, I totally went crazy for a second there. So, yes, he decided to travel to nearby Morthal. And travel to nearby Morthal he did. I'm so sorry I'm not being an impressive narrator at the moment. This book, it's old and faded. Many pages were blank. Hence the blankness in my own commentary. It was early morning when he arrived at Morthal, because for some reason it took him bloody ages to get there, because... well, because he's the dragonborn. The snow suddenly stopped. Surely a good sign. Pix and Pooks knew he was close to the owner of the fragment. He decided now was not the time for the formality of waiting for an invitation. In he snuck, quickly and quietly. But he could not see the fragment.
We've gone from a Jarl lost in her own head to a Jarl that cares for nothing but herself. A lot of good that does us.
You seemed upset about something.
The world's going mad, and our Jarl doesn't care. She's only in it for herself. If she's the best Ulfric has to offer, we might have been better off with the Imperials.
Okay, I'm looking for pieces of Mehrunes' razor.
Don't know what you're talking about, stranger.
Really? Silas Vesuvius says otherwise.
I've heard of him. My father had suspicions about his connection to the Mythic Dawn. Guess they were true. I don't need this. My family wasted 8 generations keeping that razor safe from a dead cult. As far as I care, it can stay locked in my house.
You won't miss it then.
You want the hilt that bad? Fine. Here's the keys. It's locked in a chest inside my house. All right then.
There was a strange flash, but nothing seemed to have come of it. However, this was the hilt of Mehrunes' razor, the first of the pieces he needed. He took an egg on his way out, as well as a few alchemical ingredients. If one is wondering why he did this, one must remember that he is the dragonborn, and his motives are his own. Now all the dragonborn desired was sleep, because it had been a long day of travel to Dawnstar. Initially, he had come there for dark purposes. His purpose now was perhaps even more sinister. He mounted his horse and then dismounted because, again, the dragonborn's motivations, his own. He briefly forgot where the inn was because the dragonborn's memory is his own. Stepping into the inn, he walked right into a wooden plank because the dragonborn's sight
Running an inn weren't my...
is his
joking?
own.
You just rented a room for me. See ya.
Apparently, he still owned this bed. The dragonborn's bed was his own. After a long and refreshing nap, there were yet more fragments to collect. Fragments the likes of which you have never before seen. Something was brewing. More vampires. Such is the way of it these days.
Your blood is already... Heard they're reforming the Dawn Guard. Vampire hunters or something in the old fort near Riften. Might consider joining up myself.
It was a funny sort of morning, but the dragonborn really did have no more time to waste.
Valiant takes care of me now.
He cared little for Agni's plight. All he cared for was the next fragment. He did not wish to bring the hilt to Silas. That is most upsetting. The blade shards. That is what he needed. He thinned down his journal such that he could see the wood for the trees. He saw a blade shard, and he saw only the blade shard so far. It was a bloody big map he carried around with him everywhere. Okay. That, methinks, is simple enough. To the stables he travelled. The stables of Markarth, that is. The journey was long, as was the way of it these days. He thought of alchemy tables as he travelled, because he really had nothing better to think about. Then he thought of high elves. Nearly the entire day was spent in travel. He dismounted his trusty horse, Chocolate Drop, and prepared to travel to whatever place it was. He did not wish to take his horse with him on this venture, as he felt that she would be in undue peril. Though he himself had absolutely no ideas on how to proceed over the rocks, which separated him from his destination.